Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. Hello and welcome to How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with Sam Turner. Sam has an extensive senior corporate career helping to scale his last company from 0.8 billion to 6 billion in sales. Has spent the last 15 years outside of the UK. He's since moved from the corporate world into the world of entrepreneurship through acquisition, being a co-founding partner of Advantos. Did I say that right?
Mm-hmm.
Advantos, all right. Equity partner and the founder and CEO of Advantos HVAC Group, where he's already completed his first acquisition. He loves working with and developing people, as well as utilizing his financial, strategic, and commercial skills, helping small businesses to prosper. Man, let's just get jumping right in there. Thank you
Yep.
for being on the show.
Pleasure.
Let's jump in with kind of what got you into this. You went from corporate world to a very entrepreneurial world.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what that brought that on. And
Yeah, sure. So my background, actually, I started when I left school. My first job was playing football, and you'd say soccer, but so not American football, but the proper football. So I did that for 3 years. So I'm kind of a sportsman at heart, but then didn't make it for whatever reason, and then sort of drifted into accountancy, bizarrely. But I think I say that story because I think the sports element and actually failing almost at that is really kind of one of the key drivers for me to succeed at something, if that makes sense. So I wasn't necessarily the most academically minded. I was okay, but not the top, etc. But I had this drive to succeed, and I ended up, long story short, in the corporate world. I qualified as an accountant and worked in the travel industry in various roles, being up to FD, so finance director roles, commercial director. So I moved from finance to the commercial world, and I was part of a journey of one business that scaled from sub 1 billion in sales to 6 billion. So it's a massive growth that included acquisitions, but we were sold. Actually, we were part of a listed FTSE 100 business here in the UK, and we were sold to private equity. And then with that came the desire to go and acquire our largest competitors, which we did. We spent a couple of years integrating these businesses. It was very, very painful, and that's part of my philosophy going forward about whether to integrate or not. It kind of stems a little bit from my experience there. But anyway, in terms of then why I decided to leave that was for a couple of key reasons. I think the first was, I was living outside the UK with my family. I've got two young kids, twins, that they're 9 years old. And at the time, this was 2 years ago, at the time, I was on a plane pretty much every week, either on a Sunday or a Monday. And it got to the point where my daughter was literally, started to cry when I said, I was having to go again on a Sunday. So that was kind of one big driver. I thought, I don't want to do that forever. The second was it got quite the politics, let's say, in the corporate world were something that I just disliked, intensely disliked, and that's not for me. And one of my key values is integrity, and I just don't like this kind of element of going behind, trying to manipulate things, etc. Is just not for me. So that was the second one, and the third one was I was in a fairly responsible position. We had almost a couple of thousand people in my team all over the world, and yet I wasn't really able to make any big decisions, and I felt like almost a bit of a puppet in a role that couldn't actually make any decisions. So I think the three things compelled me to leave and to do something different. I managed to secure an exit that was good and spent some time off, which was nice. And then I was really thinking about doing two things. One is property investing, and I know it's something that you've done and you've come from, and you're still in there. And the other was investing in small business. And I spent a lot of time reflecting on what were my strengths, what did I really enjoy, And I sort of quickly came to the conclusion that actually it made much more sense to put my skills to use in a business context, work with people that I love to work with, and actually go that route. So that's kind of the driver behind why I went there. And obviously, it enabled me to then do something for myself. So where my decisions were, I was accountable, but I also had the decision making capability. So that was great. And then I spent a lot of time reading, digesting content, going on various courses, and built a network of people. I was living in Switzerland at the time, and we a number of us that were as part of like a mentoring or an accountability group after one of the sort of training programs decided to try to work together. And that's when we created Advantos Equity Partners, which was about probably 10 months ago, something like that, 10, 11 months ago. There's five of us, five partners. We're all coming from different backgrounds. And um, and then I guess that was how I sort of got into it. We can cover more in terms of why the industry that I've chosen and that sort of thing. But that's kind of my key drivers were that I was fed up with the corporate world. I wanted to do something where I could really utilize my skills. I mean, I really value working with people. Part of my role in the corporate world was working with small businesses, so they were my customers, and I really relished actually helping them to grow. Maybe slightly less sophisticated, but there were easy things that we could do to help people grow. So that really strikes a chord with me, helping small businesses to grow and working and developing people, and that I think is critical into a critical component of what I'm trying to do now.
I don't think real estate would have been a bad choice either, but right before you jumped online with me, I actually got off the phone with one of my real estate investment friends who I convinced to take a look at what we're doing, buying businesses and stuff. About a week or two ago, a guy called me from one of my outreaches saying that I'm looking for business to buy, and he had owned a tow truck company before
Hmm.
and wanted his business partner died. Short story: the business partner died. To make sure the business partner's family was taken care of, they sold the assets off. He thought he was done. He took a couple years off, and now he's back working for another tow company, landing hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of contracts for him, and it's just eating him alive. So he calls me off of one of my ads and said, "Do you invest in like?" And he explained what he's doing. I was like, "Yeah, that's too much of a startup for me." But I have, and it's going to take more time than I have, but I have somebody that may be interested. So I introduced him to the real estate investor, private lender friend of mine, who was wanting to try something like this. He says that 60,000, I can't buy a house here for that, and the money I'll make per year
Yeah.
is multitudes times what I would take if if I put $60,000 down on a house.
And I think that's one of the things I'd done is sort of put together a presentation or a deck for investors, because we have some investors that have committed some capital. And one of the things that really excited me, despite it's not necessarily just about the money. I think I have other drivers, and even with the money, I think I have a very clear driver behind why the money's one of those drivers is to do something with that. So I'm very clear about that. But what was interesting when researching this is if you look at the average returns in this type of asset class in terms of buying into this, whether it's this kind of search fund model or the ETA, so the entrepreneurship through acquisition model, the average and the data around this, the average returns, massively outweigh any other type of asset class. And when you consider that the risk profile is not gigantic, it's not like betting on an idea. It's you're acquiring in many cases very established cash flow streams. So I think that once you start to understand that, I think that's really interesting for people to get involved with.
Cool. We have a guest, Perez. Perez says hello. So, so anyway, it's always cool to have somebody jump in and say something. If you have any questions out there, if you're listening, you have questions, ask us. So we'll try to get to them. Um, so you were in the corporate world. You got retrained. You kind of evaluated your next move. That's interesting. I did the same kind of thing. Funny thing is that private investor is actually that I was telling you about. in a previous life, or I'd say a couple years ago, he was one of the Robin Adonis trained coaches type of guys.
Yeah.
And I brought him on to help me with like a performance coach, and then we become really great friends. And he still coaches me even though we're friends. Like he's retired Marine Corps, so you can imagine what that coaching looks like. A lot of times
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
smack, 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 right? But I had him. I brought him on. Like I connected with him because it's kind of helped take me to the next level. And one day, I had a real estate investment firm. And one day we were closing some deals, and we had a call with him, or I had a call with him. He says, "Man, with everything you know, you should be playing a bigger game." Ever since that point, I would close a house, right? In our business, not me, but the business would make $30,000 or $40,000 on that deal. And in the back of my head, it's like, but you should be playing a bigger game,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I'd already been training people in investing, and I was already training people to take the next step. And the logical next step of real estate is go from residential houses to like things like RV parks, apartment complexes,
Yeah.
mobile homes, like cash flow. So I was coaching people to do that, and I was like, I don't want to go against. I had 5 or 6 of my good friends I coached into moving to that next. And it's like if I take that same approach, because I'm at the stage where I really need to do something different. If I take that, I'm competing with everybody I trained, right? And I
Yeah.
don't, and I'm pretty competitive. I would dominate them, and I just didn't feel right about going in and just like out marketing them. And like, and if you're listening, every one of them's got an ego. Like you'd never be able to dominate. I, that's what the other guys thought when I got into the foreclosure business too, right? But stopping foreclosures, I honestly, I did this jump because I seen an opportunity here, and I'm sure you see that same opportunity. It's,
Yeah.
it's taught in
Yeah.
all these courses.
Yeah.
There are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of businesses that either are going to shut down
Yeah.
or be sold or transferred in the next 5 to 10 years,
Yeah.
and there's just not enough buyers around. So, and I was just telling you before the show, the one you chose, the heat and air business, that is just amazing. I just had Adam Coffey on the show. He'll probably come out just before you do, but they built $1 billion company,
Yeah.
from the heat and air space,
Yeah.
right? Doing through acquisitions and mergers. They buy a cornerstone. They buy like you've already got your one, and then they started adding onto it by buying others
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
expanding that way. And his thing is the private equity wants to see a 30% growth. So, and the only way to really hit that, you can run a business really well, even in the heat and air space. And, businesses typically get 10, 15% growth, maybe 20% growth. But
On a good year. Yeah.
on a good year, you start adding acquisitions and mergers, you can hit that 30 pretty evenly because you're
For
buying
sure.
other companies that are growing at 10, 15, 20,
Yeah.
right? So you said you're almost not able to do it without buying other companies.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, um,
Do you know, in terms of the model that he used, was he looking at sort of acquiring and consolidating the companies, or how did he do it?
he did it inside. It sounds like to me through our conversations that he did it totally through the private equity model, meaning the private equity company hired him as CEO because he came from a different, like a corporate world,
Yep.
to go out and be the CEO of the cornerstone company and help grow. So, but the cool thing is he learned very well, and he's written 2 books on it, on what a equity company is looking for, and then how to sell to the next private equity company. Right. So
Yep.
there were some where he actually said he did. I think the max was at 5. So he got brought in, they grew it, they sold it to another one, a bigger private equity.
Yep.
A lot of people, if you're new to acquisition entrepreneurship, understand that there's tiers, right? Most of us that are listening here, we're buying companies. We're looking to buy companies at that, 1 million turnover in the UK for you listening there, revenue in the United States. I say that because here in the United States, we say turnover. It's the employees leaving.
Okay.
Turnover is like how fast you're losing your employees.
Yeah.
It's not, in there, it's revenue, right?
Yeah.
It's the so our revenue is your turnover, but most of the people that our circle is looking. They're right below that private equity model. They're kind of 1 to 5 million, or $10 million in EBITDA, where the private equity is, or sorry, $1 to 5 million in revenue,
Yeah.
where the private equity companies, what he was saying is they're starting out at that. Maybe some of them are at 1 million in EBITDA, but most of them are at 1.5 million and up. That's
Yeah.
where they'll start buying and looking at you at that. But so yeah, what's your game plan, man? You bought one. You've got that. You got in. You did the training. You formed a team, which is
Yeah.
critical. I want people to understand that why didn't you go it on? That's a great question. Why did you not go it on your own? You've got the experience.
Yeah, so I think working with other people is first and foremost. You got to understand what's your preference, and my preference is to as work with other people. That's what I like. It's what I enjoy. We touch base every single week. We're discussing deals every single week. We're discussing best practice, how to raise capital in this market, blah 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 blah. So all of that is much easier, I think, and much more enjoyable doing it as part of a team. So this is, I guess, first and foremost. But I think it also helps because we can bring opportunities together. So there's more, if you like, eyes and ears in the market. So we can all be involved in each other's deals, which effectively we are. So it just compounds your ability to connect, I think, with more businesses, with more investors, with more maybe debt capital providers, just with a greater sense of connection to stakeholders. Plus, it's more enjoyable, and from my perspective, now maybe others they prefer doing it on their own. But that's what we've done. The way we've done it is we still have a fairly kind of loose model in the sense that so for example the HVAC business and that's the roll up that I'm involved in and leading is effectively my focus, but the others are investing are as part of my investor community. Let's say have pledged capital to that, and one of them is sitting on the board of that. So that's how we're still involved, and obviously we update together every week. How's it going, etc. Um, Likewise, the other deals that these guys are doing may be in more technology related areas. Maybe one or two of us. I'm investing in one. Other people are investing in one or two. So it's not like everyone is investing the same in every deal. It's kind of open, and then we create the structures based on who wants to participate in that field. But so far, it's worked well, and yeah, my game plan is to build sort of 10+ companies in the coming 3 to 4 years. We're looking at building initially, and this I say initially because this is the deck that we had for investors, and what we're saying to investors and the banks also is we'll get to 50 million revenue in 4 years, principally through acquiring that business. So we don't assume a huge amount of growth in that. We acquired the first business end of November. That's about a £5.5 million revenue or turnover business. So that's gone very well. The transition's been really good, and it's about then looking at the next. I've just signed last week actually heads of terms on another, and I've got one that we're about to sign heads of terms on now. So that will be three, but I'm hoping for another three in addition by the end of this year.
So I have a couple questions in that sprint. Do you mind sharing what the EBITDA was on the 5 million?
Yeah, it's about 8-9%, so it's about £400,000.
It's not bad. I mean, 10% I think is average, but I like
Yep.
which. So you've got clearly room to grow inside of that. There are some service companies. It's funny as I own a pest control company. I bought it out of a favor to a couple of relatives, or I say bought it. We started buying it, and then I ended up pretty much creating one from scratch because the guy we were buying it from like was really a mess. So I think
Right.
we got some of his equipment and maybe some of his customers. And
The rest
anyway,
is yours. Yeah.
the rest of it we had to start over with. So big mistake. Then I went and got trained because like I bought this wrong. So I went and got trained. But so you got your first I was gonna say the reason I got into it's like it's not uncommon for a pest control company to have a 30 or 40% profit margin. Like it's the
Wow.
industry standard is
Yeah.
18 to 20, but there if you're really lean and you're
Outside of
really
that.
careful,
Yeah.
you can push that number. And I just
Yeah.
I didn't believe it until I seen 3 or 4 that were for sale and they were claiming 35 or whatever, profit. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
Brokers lie. That's a lie.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
I seen another one, then another one. So I better go check this out. So I haven't done the research on HVAC, but I have to assume you could push that number up probably to 15 or 20.
Yeah, it depends. HVAC, which area. I mean, you've got different, let's say, trades within there. You've got the heating side, air conditioning side, the more the plumbing. Is it on the products or service? Or there's a kind of a quite a large scope, and our scope is quite large, so we want sort of a complementary set of businesses, not all the same, not all exactly the same company. But I would say on average, the kind of margins range between 5 and 10%. So
Okay.
it's not a high margin business, but there are some businesses within there, and some that we're looking at that are 15% plus. Yeah.
I'm actually going to Google it right now because I'm curious what it is in the United States to see if it's yeah, you're
Mhm.
right. 10% or higher is is possible is what it says. I figured in the United States it might be higher because we charge the snot out of people for HVAC. But I was curious what if there was a disconnect between the UK. So if you ever see me, you guys on the show, if you see me glancing over here, I run this podcast on a 4 monitored monster of a computer, so I can do multiple things and answer questions. Someday I'll be famous enough to have a production engineer that will just feed me that stuff in a chat line or something. So the second question I have is,
Yeah.
are you growing? So there's a couple different ways this could grow, right?
Yeah.
Uh, HVAC is pretty cool because you could just be residential, you could do residential commercial, you could do commercial and like do HVAC fixing, walk-in coolers and that type of stuff inside of gas stations, restaurants, and all that stuff. There's
Yeah.
so many different aspects. Is that what you mean when you say you're going to expand in its capabilities?
So so our scope is to buy complementary businesses or HVAC and complementary trades. So let me give an example. So one company that we're at heads of terms with now is an electrical installation and maintenance company. So
That's where I was going next. You're ahead of me.
you wouldn't say exactly HVAC,
Hmm.
but it's on the fringes. But if I look at the one trade that is supporting the heating side most and is dependent on is probably the electrical side. So there is a very clear complementary aspect there. And for example, our first business is focused almost 100% on the residential market, but on the new build residential market. So they install all of the heating and plumbing elements of new builds properties. So, but we're talking about large scale developments, not individual properties. But but this electrical company is focused on the retail, so like a commercial customer base. But again, if I look at both of those customer bases, they both need electricals, and they both need sort of more the heating and plumbing and elements. So the cross sell opportunities there when you get into customer bases are very significant. So you don't need to focus on it has to be the same, exactly the same type of business, because my philosophy is very much not to consolidate businesses together, because I just see you typically destroy more value than you create, even in a large company. So in a small company, you undoubtedly will destroy more value than you create, unless you've got literally exactly the same businesses, and therefore it makes sense to put them all on one system, one back office, one sales function, blah blah blah. But so, given these are not, we will keep them and run them as like individually autonomous businesses within a portfolio, so within a group. But we will create a model for them to be able to collaborate and share best practice, talent, capital, access to bigger contracts, cross selling of opportunities between customers and suppliers, and that cross selling element, just from the conversations I'm having, I see as really massive. Now you've got to be careful not to kind of be too quickly going after that. You need to kind of slowly, not to disrupt the kind of momentum of the business as it is. But the upside there, I think, is very big. And then you don't get into the perils of how to smash businesses together and reduce cost and stuff, which I think is a recipe for disaster in this type of business for me.
So it's interesting because we have the same strategy. The way I'm going to focus on growing the pest control company is I've already been in negotiations for the last year on like 6 different ones here in town, but I will buy one larger pest control company because I bought this one too small. But
Yep.
after that, when I was like, I'm in this business is in Tulsa. When I'm ready to go to, like, say, Oklahoma City, which is 100 miles away, I will not buy a pest control company down there. What I'll do is maybe something that is great to cross sell with. So for me,
Yep.
um, you know, uh, like a cleaning service, like a cleaning service that cleans houses that
Yep.
actually has 25 or more, doing $2 or $3 million a year, got 25 more
Yep.
employees doing that. And then the cool thing is whatever office is there, I'll go ahead and license a pest control out, park 2 trucks out there, hire 2 employees. So
Yep.
my operations here will have a footprint there, right? And then the same thing, the operation in Tulsa we'll follow their process for cleaning, get cleaning crews here and start getting jobs here. And that's how I plan to expand it. Sounds like you could do the same thing. When you enter new markets, to avoid the collaboration, or the integration, you just for you, I mean, for what you're doing, heat and air, a foam insulation company that actually has the tools to detect thermal leaks and stuff like that would be awesome for you,
Yep,
right?
yep,
Hey, we're
yep,
installing we're installing a high efficiency unit, but I can tell your windows and doors are probably not going to hold the air very well. Would you like us
yep.
to have our insulation company come out, scan your house, show you where you need some help, right? So,
Exactly, and there's a great example. I had a call with a company earlier today, and they specialise in renewable energy, which is obviously the sort of key thing, attacking the sort of the key climate change issues, which the heating industry is a big part of. And you could see absolutely them being part of the group to then provide the expertise for the rest of the group, and actually having that within the group is a massive compliment, because they're doing well, but they're very small. They can't do everything that they could get, because they just don't have the access to resources, etc. But if they're working as part of a bigger group with lots of, let's say, people who are doing the maintenance and installations of the different heating systems, then their expertise can actually permeate into what these guys do, and they can add more value that way. And that's another thing I think with the heating space, given that it is such a I wanted an industry that wasn't going to be disrupted by Google and Amazon. That for me was clear. Um, but actually, to say it's completely stable is also not correct, because the industry is shifting away from gas. I mean, here in the UK, the government has kind of announced that after a certain period of time, there's no more gas boilers will be fitted in houses, which is what everyone has today, and it's still what's going in new build housing. So there's new technologies that are going to come along, and we need to be at the forefront of that. And I think that that's what I'm trying to do as well, positioning businesses that can leverage that, as well as one or two businesses that really are at the forefront of that to take forward. And I think in terms of creating value for the group as well, when I think about an exit, which is years down the road, is not tomorrow. I think clearly any kind of energy related or heating related or HVAC related company has to be demonstrating that they're at the forefront of that.
yeah, my and you might be able to develop the same vision. My vision with what we call it is lullaby pest control. So I actually have the card on my desk here, so you can actually see the. We let my
No,
daughter name it. Oh, sorry, it was off center. Was I forgot
you
the
can see.
there he goes.
There you go.
Uh,
Yep.
my daughter was about 4 or 5 when we were putting this all together. She's 6 now, and we were outside with my cousins that were I was helping buy this thing, and we are trying to name it. And my daughter said, "No, you guys are going to call it Lullaby Pest Control because you guys wouldn't kill bugs. You're just putting them to sleep, right?" So it was like that's kind of cool. So
That is
it
nice. Yeah,
basically the logo there says Lullaby Pest Control, but it says so you can sleep better at night. That's all it says on it, right?
that's good.
Um,
Good.
but
Like,
I hope to turn it into something you could do too. Is like instead of calling it you know Advantos, what do you got it there? HVAC group. It
yeah,
could be what I'm going to do with Lullaby. Is eventually it'll be Lullaby Home Services,
yeah,
right? And I want to have if you need a handyman, I want you to call me. If you need your house cleaned, I want you to call me,
yes,
right? And when the cleaners go in there and she sees she sees a bug, she goes, "Hey," and she sees something crawl underneath one of the doors. She
yeah,
goes, "You probably should call our handyman service and have them replace the threshold."
yeah,
Right. Or, there's like, I would keep them independent like you. I don't like the idea of integration. Some maybe they have their own. We all use one CRM, but they all have their own kind of zone in it, so they don't see everybody
yeah,
else's garbage.
yeah,
But I want them to. We would have meet. I mean, my vision is we'd have meetings where they're all there and we're all cross trained. And this is what you say when you see this,
yes,
right? And
yeah,
some of my guys, I mean, we kind of do this already. We do some clean outs and stuff because of the pest control business. We show up, we have investors that buy houses like, oh my god, it's covered with bugs, and we show up and it's like there's stuff everywhere. It's like the best way to do with this is to have it cleaned out completely. We know you're going to remodel it anyway for $400 or whatever the number is. My
yeah,
crew will come in there with dump bed trailers and haul all that stuff off. Then we'll spray the house when there's no garbage there, right? What we don't tell them is we spray it for free first because we want to kill as many bugs as we can before we put that stuff in our dump bed trailer and haul it around. But we spray it, put it, haul it off, spray it again, and but you guys could do the same. Like you could have a home services business where somebody shows up and they just like they can get you squared away, which is pretty much anything that happens at your house.
Yeah,
So
no, and absolutely, and I think that's a good vision. I think what we need to do is have some of the core services, air conditioning, electricals, plumbing, heating, within the group, and then sort of work out how they can over time come together and provide the services. Because some are servicing commercial customers, some are servicing final customers. So we need to figure it all out, but it's exciting. But I love the vision around the sort of Lullaby. Maybe that's the kind of like the umbrella brand. Then is it the kind of Lullaby group
yep.
or something like that, or Lullaby Home Services group, but maybe with individual businesses within that.
I
Yeah.
think that I think that you guys have the same play there. Let's jump back to your deal you've done already. How did you guys fund that? Did you like do a really creative deal and the seller funded it, or did you do an LBO model or a leverage buyout?
Yeah, so it was I would say it's a more typical LBO deal. So we used the combination of equity, debt, external debt, and deferred consideration. For me, that's probably the way that we'll look. So look at the next few deals at least. What I will then look at is having a model whereby companies can join through a share swap based approach, because at the moment we're sort of obviously buying companies that people want to exit, but maybe there are companies that people don't want to exit. And I know actually a few of my, let's say, not close friends, but friends who own businesses in this space. I think they're still young enough, but actually they have no exit plan at the moment. And maybe their business is doing a couple of £1 million turnover revenue. Um, but what's the future for them? They have, and when you talk to them, they have no plans. And you mentioned about, well, if you actually be part of a group, you could swap your shares there. That you explain it to them, and all of a sudden they're kind of going, well, that sounds really interesting. So that I will do. But that will be after we've got the first few businesses on board. So yeah, this deal uh, was, I would say, a more typical LBO. We actually negotiated the deal with, I think initially it was something like 45-50% on completion. And what happened is the numbers turned out to be worse because they only do the numbers once a year. so so it was at the end of the year, but they hadn't done the statutory accounts. So when they did that, they had a bit of a surprise on the numbers, and the numbers came down. So we renegotiated the whole deal, and instead of a purchase price of closer to 2 million, it ended up being closer to 1 million. But what I did do is pay more upfront, so that's where the external debt was helpful. So I paid, I think, 2/3 or 70% upfront with 30% deferred, and that's the model that we used.
Now, did you guys have does the UK have anything equivalent to what we call the SBA, the Small Business
No,
Administration?
no, unfortunately not. I mean, the access to that in the US would be good. I mean, we're looking to also add somebody from the US to give us that kind of reach into obviously that huge market. But no, we don't. And I think actually financing and funding in the UK is something that you would think, actually, given that the UK and London especially is one of the financial centres of the world, access to capital would be very easy, very straightforward. But I think in comparison to many countries, including others in Europe, it's the opposite. So actually, access to funding for deals that are, I would say, sub 500,000 EBITDA are very, very difficult. There's very few lenders in the market that will want to touch that. Most deals will look at asset-backed finance only. So most lenders will look at that. I was lucky to find a lender that's supporting now not just this deal but the whole plan, which is great, on a purely sort of cash flow lens. So not with a asset-backed, let's say, finance.
I was going to
So that's,
say,
that's good.
I was curious on how many assets a heat and air company would have. You got your tools, which are not probably fundable. Got your
No.
trucks, maybe fundable, but here there are some companies that would consider like solid long-term contracts. So contracts of 2 or more years with the government or some corporation that's just a cornerstone that's not going anywhere. They would
Yeah,
consider that an asset, and actually you can finance against something like that.
yeah.
But I was curious when you said it was asset backed. I was like, what assets does a heat and air company have? It's
Well,
a service based business.
yeah, the main asset normally in a business like that is debtors,
Yeah.
and in fact, that's the kind of the probably the easiest asset to finance as well. So you can normally get on between 80 and 90%, or between 70 and 90%, I would say, depending on the quality of debtor. So that's the big one, but even that wouldn't have been enough in terms of the level of debtors in the business. So yeah, it is tricky, and I think what I do see is a lot of people now wanting to get into the space to look at buying businesses. They do, a couple of courses and think, this is the easiest way to make money, and then realize that it's actually not as simple as that. I mean, if you do things the right way, it's not complicated, but I think there are certain things that you need to understand, and I think many people don't, and I think that's where we have a challenge. And I think you mentioned earlier where you've got this disconnect of buyers and sellers, and I do see that. I know the stats are all about the US. There's millions of businesses that with through retirement sales are going to come up and then nowhere to go, and it's really sad, isn't it? Because like you said, I mean, what's going to happen with those people, with those services, and I think the same will be true in the UK and other markets. And yet, I don't think we're still doing a good enough job educating people on how to do that and actually connecting the dots. Because I still see lots and lots of people thinking they can just do the following thing and then go and buy three, four, five, six businesses, and you look at them 2 years later and they're still trying to do the same thing. And you know, so we've got to ask ourselves what's missing there. I think in terms of the education and
Right. And it's it's here in the United States, and it's probably the same there. I see it. It's kind of I want to call it an insane cycle. You got business owners retiring, shutting their doors and walking away, closing them off. And before I got into acquisition and mergers, I can tell you right now, I've shut the doors on one, two, three, four, five companies. I grew them, built them. And the market changed, something happened or whatever. I got burned out, and then started something else. And I sold one of them, to a partner. Like I sold my half to him, and that was just kind of an asset switch. We had a bunch of assets together in that business, and I just gave him more than I took when I left. Right. So that said, almost every business, I just kind of, okay, I'm going to do this now. This market's kind of shifting, and I started over. It's interesting. There are so many valid business now that my eyes are open. There's millions of businesses that they need to have a transition plan. They need somebody like you as an entrepreneur to step in, run them, and keep them going.
yeah,
But most people, even me, to this day, I have this thing. Well, I'll just I can't find something to buy right this second. I'll just go build something,
yeah.
right? And that's the entrepreneurial thing is like I'll just go build it. And if you look at the statistics behind that, like 95% of all businesses,
Horrible, isn't it? Yeah,
yeah, that fail in the first 5 years, and
yeah,
out of those 5% that succeed, only I'm gonna say out of that 5%, so you got 100 businesses, right? Five of them make it past 5 years. In that in that five that made it past 5 years, within 10 years, only one, I think, in 100 of those five. So if you look at it, you'd have to have 2,000 businesses go through, make it past, to what they call an area of significance. So a revenue of 1 million or more, right?
that's
So
great.
you've
So,
got a shot. I think
great.
I did the math once, and I might somebody correct me. I hate doing live math, but it's right. I think it's a shot of like 1 in 2,000. So if you want to create $1 million business, statistically, you need to go start 2,000 businesses, even if it's in heat and air. You have to go start 2,000 heat and air
Yeah,
companies, run them for less, for 5 years, and you'll hit one that hits 1 million.
yeah,
Or you could go figure this out, find the financing, work with investors, lenders, or whatever, and buy one that's already at 2 or 3 million.
yeah.
Once you
No,
realize that, it's just like,
no, completely agree. I think the what you see in these types of industries is a lot of people that are, they're working for someone else, and they go out on their own, and they start as a one man band, and and maybe finishes a one-man band or a two-man band or a three-man band. So you have a lot of those businesses that maybe they're not creating a new idea, but they're just kind of working for themselves almost there. But yeah, you do see this in terms of relevant sized businesses. The chance of doing that from scratch versus acquiring, I think all the stats lead to you're better off acquiring. Having said that, it's still not natural for people to do, is it? Because people think, well, I want to start something. I'm the opposite, so I'm not from an entrepreneurial background. Whilst I would say I wasn't a purely typical corporate kind of guy, but I always wanted to do. I want to do something by myself, but I'm not. I'm not an ideas person, so I'm not a. Well, let's think of a product or service that doesn't exist today, and we'll do that. I'm very much a what's an existing, let's say, business, and how do we grow that? How do we scale that? How do we do more of that kind of thing? And that's why for me it fits much better with my skill sets as well. And the final piece, and you will have done it then many times, is the work involved in doing that is is crazy. And I'm at a period of my life where I've worked hard for many years. It's like I'm not saying I'm not going to work hard, I'm not going to work 90-hour weeks, to get a business off the ground. That's not what I want right now. I've got young kids in. So all of those things together, for me, it's kind of a no-brainer. But I do think that people still assume once they start to think about doing it, that maybe it's kind of easier to do that than maybe it is, if that makes sense. It's
Yeah, I
not it's
get
not
that.
it's not like it's not like it's majorly complex, and you can do it,
Yeah.
but you've got to go in with your eyes open about what's realistic and what's not, and therefore where to focus more. And I see a lot of people scratching around stuff that's never going to happen, and that's the bit that frustrates me because I feel like maybe the education around it still is pushing people into those things that maybe is never going to happen. If that makes sense.
I get that, and I honestly think almost all the guys that teach this stuff, if you did exactly what they told you to do at the volume they told them that they tell you to do it, you'd probably pull it off. But most people can't. If you look at the program both you and I did, it's talking about really low down creative structures, and a lot of people say that's just not possible anymore. Business owners won't take that. But I can tell you it is. Like we started a roll up process for marketing companies,
Okay.
and within 200 days, we had over $100 million. About 98 million to be honest. It depends on which day you ask. One day it was like 89, next day it was 98, and then but we had commitments of people who are zero down, going to do a equity swap into a big roll up, and in a short period of time, we were already on track to do over $100 million in revenue in less than a year. And
But
unfortunately, that fell apart because of some team dynamics on the team that we selected to run it.
yeah.
Is about as far as I'm, for legal reasons, about as far as I'm willing to go inside of that conversation.
Okay.
but
Enough said. No,
but
no. I'm not saying it's not feasible, and some of those creative structures I think are great. What I feel is maybe still there's a disconnect between the people that are. So, for example, in that case, you have plenty of experience in buying, running, starting businesses. So you're drawing on all that experience and whoever else you were working with, right? So if you're new to this from having never done it before, I think it's very difficult to do those sorts of complex elements without some kind of knowledge, real knowledge and understanding and experience in that space. If that makes sense. So I think
right,
I think it's that a little bit that disconnect that I think the person that's really never done anything like it, not even not done it, because I would say I hadn't done it, although from a corporate perspective I've bought companies before, but having people that have never been anywhere near even running a P&L in a bigger business or anything, I think it's it's a little bit misleading in terms of saying, oh, it's so easy, you just do X, Y, and Z, and I think that's I guess the point that I
yeah,
and
I get that.
I think it could be refined by actually focusing them in a slightly different way, if that makes sense.
So I run a couple of hangouts and kind of networking things, so I get to meet the different people in this space around this, and I come across a lot of people who have taken these type of courses. their employees, maybe they're IT employees or even finance employees, they've never been responsible for P&L. They've never even seen one until they took this course, right? They don't know how to read a financial statement.
Yeah.
And, they asked me to jump on a call with them to help them negotiate purchase of business. And I was like, okay, my first step is always like, what's your team? What are your skills? And then who's on your team to fill in where you're not?
Yeah.
And it's remarkable to see some of these guys like, well, I want to be the CEO of this. Like, cool. What have you been the CEO of? Like, I'm not going to help you negotiate a deal from somebody and help you because that's what I love the negotiation side. I'll help you have the conversation. I don't have a problem getting on the phone with anybody. Never seen a phone number I didn't like. Right. Um, but that being said, I'm not going to help you do that when you like, I got to be the CEO and you've never run anything because I'm not going to help you negotiate taking over somebody's baby, right? They created this business. They may have run it
Yeah.
for 20,
Yeah.
30, 40 years.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be the guy that convinces them to hand it to you
Yeah.
when you don't have a
No
team to
experience.
support it and you have no
Yeah.
business running it, right?
Yeah.
So, the one thing I'm real big on is what are your skills and who's on your team to augment that. There's a book by Dan Sullivan called Who Not How, and I absolutely love it. Right?
Yeah.
I play the joke with people in the merger knock. I do a knock knock joke, right? And the knock, I go knock knock. You go ahead, knock
Who's
knock.
there?
I need a
I need a who.
Yeah, you do. Sorry, you're gonna need a lot of who's, right? So the whole joke is like, you don't need to figure out how to do this. You need a who. You need to figure out
Yeah.
who do you need on your team, right? And that's the whole premise of that book. And but it's it's incredible to think that you're going to go from an hour, like some of these guys aren't even at the point where they're salary, right? They're hourly wage IT, or one of the guys a janitor, right? He had a little bit of an inheritance. He had the 10 grand to pay for some mentoring, jumped right into this. He's like, I'm going to buy my first business. And I was like, cool. Who's going to run it for you?
Yeah. You're completely right, and I don't want to come across as being dismissive of people's ambitions. Is not at all what I'm saying. In fact, I'm the first to help anybody who would want to reach out to me, and but it's that disconnect between what's really involved in this and like you say, the experience, etc., that you've got. So you have to, as you rightly say, fill in the gaps. Now somebody could have no experience but recognize and be self-aware that they've got no experience and work hard to plug as many gaps as possible in their own knowledge and work with those people that can bring the knowledge that where they've got the gaps. And that's what you want, and that's the holistic view that I think doesn't exist enough in terms of the way some of the training elements are there, because it's kind of generic. This is how you buy, um, and here's the techniques to buy. But I think buying is one thing. Then there's a lot of detail that's not really covered in terms of dealing with a lender, for example. If you haven't got a very good understanding of the financials, or somebody that has, you will struggle. You will struggle to have those conversations. So walk into that knowing that you need somebody. Again, you've not got to be an expert, but know somebody who has and research somebody. So all of this, and then the first day, how are you going to stand up in front of the team and say, "Hi guys, I'm the new guy." What's if you've never done that and you can't kind of shy away? How are you going to? How you've got to think about these things. And what I'm saying is, it should be a little bit more holistic than just these are the techniques to buy. And then I think it would be more, because ultimately we want the same thing, right? We want actually there to be more people that are able to do this to actually, make that balance in terms of the buyers and sellers in the market, and not have thousands and potentially even more than thousands of companies have to go under because there's nowhere to go.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to discourage anybody. As a matter of fact, I encourage them if you don't know anything about running business and you're really serious about buying one, buy one so big that the company's so big it's already got a general manager in place that's going to run it, and
Yeah,
you getting in the way is you getting in the way. And
yeah,
then you buy it, you own it, you operate it, and you learn as you go. And at that point, it's running well and it's yours to run, as opposed to you got to step in and help it do something which
yeah,
you're not trained or have experience
yeah,
to do.
yeah,
So, Sam, we're hitting the top of the hour now. It's 50
yeah,
minutes into this. Let's make sure everybody knows how to get a hold of you. I have your LinkedIn profile on the screen, and it's standard linkedin.com/in. And then I'm going to spell out the last part of it: Sam Turner, SAM Tuner SVT. So it's Sam Turner SVT with hyphens or dashes in between it
Yep.
on LinkedIn. You're located where? If they search for Sam Turner, that's not an uncommon name. So you're located in the UK somewhere.
Yeah, in the UK, not far from London, a place called
Okay.
Bedford, for those that know it. But yes, no, so that's great. Or also email sam.turner@advantos.com. So more than happy to, like I say, more than happy to help people that are considering getting into it, and I'm always got time to share my experiences in the space.
Now, are you guys looking to expand into other countries like the US or other stuff at some point?
Definitely, definitely. We were talking. We had a bit of a strategic goal setting, which is a bit late in the day, in 1st of March or 28th of February, when it was. It was supposed to be for this year, but we found the time early this week to do that. And one of the things that we said is we want to bring in a partner in the US, as well as in Southeast Asia, as well as potentially in Australia, and for to have more parts of the world covered. I think with the experience that we've got, we don't just cover our own locations. We have got experience, contacts, networks in other markets. But those kind of three big areas then would give us more global coverage in terms of looking at deals. Having said that, I mean my 100% my 80% focus right now is building in the UK business. But as a group, we will be looking at expanding. Absolutely, yeah.
So, yeah, I mentioned this before the show started, but before we get off here, just remind me, or even before we, after the show or something. Uh, I interviewed earlier this week Adam Coffey, which is the guy who wrote the private equity playbook. He created, or he was the CEO of a HVAC roll up that went over $1 billion. So I'll connect you with him, and he's here in the
Perfect.
United States. He's in California, I believe. At least I think that's what his LinkedIn profile said he was. I think he's in California, and maybe he knows somebody here in town that's wanting to do that again. Like that could be your team member here that would already has connections in those HVAC companies. So if
No, really.
nothing else, it'd be worth a conversation with Adam to see, because he's done it. He's been there. He knows the space. And when you're ready to sell it, he probably knows the buyer because he's sold that HVAC company a couple of
Absolutely,
times.
absolutely, and contacts like that, and I really appreciate the offer, Ronald. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Contacts like that, conversations like that. I think even if it comes to nothing, I think conversations, and this is where I'm saying, for people wanting to do something in this space, have as many conversations as possible, because if somebody knows more than you about something, and they're more than willing to give their time to help you, then take advantage of that, because that's what it's all about. And I think the good thing is in our kind of community, I see a lot of people that are like that, which is great.
It's interesting. I started this podcast for that sole purpose, right? Is to get out, make connections, make friends with people in the industry.
Yeah,
And if you look at, I was telling somebody the other day, it's like, oh, have you monetized they asked me if I monetized my podcast, like how much it's making. He's like, I haven't even thought about that. But if you really look at it, in January alone, the people I had on my podcast that I interviewed, if I would have paid for their time for that hour to hour and a half I got to spend with them, I'd have
yeah,
spent 50. I looked at every one of their websites. I was curious. I did the math. I'd have spent just over $55,000 in consulting fees in
yeah,
January for the time that I spent interviewing those individuals. So
yeah,
I do this to learn. I'm a newbie in this realm. I've been an entrepreneur for most of my life, probably since I was a teenager, mowing lawns and stuff. But I do this because I want people to know what the spaces exist. I want kind of help expand the exposure of acquisition entrepreneurialism. And then the second thing is I want to connect you guys with each other. I want the guests to be able to reach out to this the audience to be able to reach out to the guests, and the guests to be able to talk to the other guest.
yeah.
So I
That's
think
great.
that's it. I think that's going to help us all. And I see opportunities popping up. I already got people reaching out to me going, "Hey, are you interested in?" Because they heard the podcast or whatever. I've had people coming up and say, "Hey, when you need funding, let me know." You got to be careful with those. A lot of those guys who reach out to you and say, "I have funding." If it's anything like the real estate space, 99% of those are going to rip you off. So I thought about running a podcast where I just interview the people who are offering to fund your deals, and I
Yeah,
just I drill them on the podcast and see if they're scammers or not. That would be kind of
yeah.
an amusing one to do, but
No,
I
it would
haven't
be, it
pulled
would
that
be.
off.
But I think you're right. I think having people just get in touch is helpful. Obviously, you can't be naive around people trying to sell you something. But I think 9 times out of 10, that people that genuinely want to connect, talk through ideas. Is there any mutual interest in certain things? And that's great, right? And that's what it's all about. So, no, I think you're doing a great job as well, and doing that and helping the community with that. So, if there's anything I can do at all, then please do keep me in mind. But yeah, connection to Adam would be fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah, it's Adam Coffee. Yeah, so Adam Coffee. But yeah, I'll make that connection. I'll probably do it via email. Um, I was making a lot of connections on LinkedIn, and I just got a message this morning going, "You've reached your maximum for the week. You
yeah,
have to wait till next week." And I was like, "Okay,
yeah.
maybe I got a little ambitious to reach out." So anyway,
Okay, great,
but I'll
great.
send you guys an email, and we'll introduce you guys, and maybe you can help each other out. If nothing else, it'd be a great guy to know when you get to the point, maybe 3-4 years from now, when you're thinking about exiting. Um,
Definitely.
Having him in your Rolodex would be amazing, just because he's done it before and he knows who those buyers are, right?
No, absolutely.
I think you said there's
Invaluable to
something like 6,000. Currently, there's something like 6,000 private equity companies, with over 6,000, with at least 3 trillion sitting idle to buy something. To be able to know out of which of those 6,000 are interested in HVAC companies would be pretty strategically important to you. So
It would be, yeah. That
yeah,
kind of database and that insight would be fantastic, wouldn't it? So, no, connections like that are invaluable. So, thank you for that, Ronald. Thank
we'll
you.
do that. And if there's anybody else, you want to meet, and same thing with your audience and stuff. If you want to meet one of these speakers and stuff, and for some reason you can't reach them through what we did on the show, give you the contact, it's okay to reach out to me, because I stay personally connected to a lot of these guys, and I'll help make that connection for you. Thank you for being on the show. I am going to call it a show, and
Good.
we'll let the industry hang out for just a second afterwards, and we'll
Yeah.
clean up anything we need to clean up.
Thanks very much, Ronald. Thank you.
All right, that's the show. The Investors and Entrepreneurs Professional Mastermind. The Investors and Entrepreneurs Professional Mastermind combines the traditional peer-to-peer mastermind introduced first in Napoleon Hill's famous book, Think and Grow Rich, with accountability partnering, where your peers help you ensure that you set goals, take actions, and get results. If you want to scale, blow past roadblocks, and achieve success faster than you might think is possible, I suggest you take a visit over to tiepm.com. That's tiepm.com, and check out the Investors and Entrepreneurs Professional Mastermind.